justice aligned by the Omnissiah's will.
So right off the bat, I need y'all to understand, Space Marine 2 is an amazing game. Straight up, it is fantastic. It is visceral, gorgeous, punchy, and the combat is beyond satisfying. It's what many of us have been looking for in a 40k game for the last decade plus, and honestly, it expands well beyond the scope of 40k. It's just a great game at its heart, at its core. I am very confident it is going to blow up in the next few days as y'all start to get your hands on it, and that even if you're not a 40k fan, it will still be worth playing, and will probably make you one. But I'll leave my full impressions and thoughts for another video. I already have 60 hours in less than a week, and all I've played so far is Operations mode, power leveling, and pushing difficulty as far as I can to get as many of my characters' high tier gear and perks as possible. More importantly, just wanted to learn the game as well as I could, to make sure that when I say something, I actually know what I'm talking about. I currently have 3 classes, the Vanguard, Bulwark, and Tac Marine, at or approaching level 20, have a bunch of Relic tier gold weapons, and have completed quite a few Ruthless difficulty missions, and the new Tzeentch focus maps, which are really goddamn hard. So even though I'm still well behind a few of the people who got early access a month ago, I feel fairly qualified to speak on balance and to help you guys get the most out of this new combat system. Space Marine 2 starts out pretty hard, in my opinion, especially in Operations mode. Skill curve for getting good in combat is steep, there's a lot of nuance and tricks for getting the most out of it, and moving through each map quickly and efficiently, and if you don't do so, just like in the Tide games, Vermintide and Darktide, you will likely get punished. If you want to look smooth and badass while taking minimal damage, it's gonna take some practice. You gotta put the work in, but once you get there, it feels incredible. Even on minimum difficulty, especially at lower levels, if you're like a level 1, there will be times where you find yourself surrounded by a ton of Tyranid warriors and chaff. You're having a real hard time cutting through it all. You're getting plunked by termagants while the Lictor eats your booty, or the game just feels super hard, where you get stun locked, run over, and feel like you just can't do anything. The game's kind of unfair, but honestly, that is rarely the case. If you play well and know what to do and how to respond, there are a ton of seemingly hopeless situations that you can not only survive in, but thrive. And that's why I need to break down a few extremely important mechanics here and fundamentals in general that will keep you alive when all else seems lost. So today, I'm going to teach you guys how to survive in Space Marine 2, because you're doing nobody any good taking a dirt nap while your battle brothers are out there purging. Number 1, in Operations, the co-op PvE mode with 6 different missions, you do not regen health the same way you do in campaign. There, it's all about melee executions and gun strikes, while Fury is active to lifesteal health and get you back in the fight. By putting enemies into a stagger state through damage or perfectly timed parries, you can perform awesome executions that let you feast on blood like a son of Sanguinius, true vampire. The same remains true in Operations, only here, resources are much less abundant on high difficulties, and there are only a few specific ways to regain health. Stims are a big one. You'll find them scattered throughout each map, but they become much less effective on Substantial and Ruthless difficulty, as in they don't heal anywhere near as much, and they're also quite rare. Only a few will exist on any given level, so we need some other way to regain lost health when a single Warrior Brood combo or Stunlock trifecta puts our HP to 1% in the blink of an eye. It can be really easy to die when there are dozens or hundreds of entities on screen, all working together to try to kill you in different ways, with some of them retaining close to one-shot capability. Contested health is therefore our blessing from the Emperor. It's a lazy health bar that gives you a short window to counteract most or all incoming damage. For example, if you take a massive shot from a Carnifex and lose 90% HP, you won't lose all of that health instantly. Your red health will instead turn white, and once a few seconds have passed, then it will fully imbue the damage dealt. But while it's still white health, it's still contested health, which means you can regen most or all of that with a couple blasts from a melt-a-gun into a horde, or something else, as long as you do damage proportional or in excess of the damage you just received. So, for example, a bone sword, the size of a minibus, just gutted me. Well, if I deal similar amounts of damage back in short order, I can act like it basically never happened and turn back the clock. But it has to be quick. The window is small, you don't have much time to do so. With that said, certain classes have innate bonuses and perks that increase that window and allow you to turn contested health back into real health. And thankfully, certain classes like the Bulwark can do some pretty sexy things that lead to massive HP swings, which we'll talk more about in a moment. As you'd expect, dodging and parrying are also incredibly important elements of this game, but you might wonder how it's possible to survive in the middle of a horde with 100 plus enemies all gnawing at your cankles. You can't dodge and parry all of them, right? This isn't Assassin's Creed. Enemies don't come at you in single file, patiently waiting for you to ram a chainsword up their ass. So what do? Well, the big thing here is that dodging, rolling, parrying, gun strikes, and executions all grant varying amounts of iframes that keep you invulnerable against certain types of damage. But a few types of damage can penetrate through or interrupt those frames, like the blue aura leaping attacks used by low-level Gaunts and Zongors, or heavy unblockables from Majoris or Extremis enemies. Weaving these tools into a smooth, cohesive combo is at the very core of Space Marine 2's gameplay loop, and where the skill expression really starts to shine, where the skill curve really comes into play. Perfect parrying on the correct frame will stun enemies, leading to free gun strikes or executions, which lead to iframes, which allow you to regain health or armor and in essence, reset the entire situation, taking a momentary breather when the proverbial shit is hitting the proverbial fan. They allow your brain time to process all this color and information, and there can be an overload of that with all the stuff going on screen, and then get ready for the next waves of attacks. In a similar vein, perfect dodging will slow down time and lead to a gun strike, giving you a bar of armor back to help cushion against chip damage. The Assault Marine, for instance, has a 50% larger perfect dodge window than every other class in the game as his innate passive, meaning it's a lot easier for jump pack players to utilize that dodge button and reap the benefits from it. But sometimes the very best thing you can possibly do to get out of a sticky situation is to just spam dodge and roll, fighting absolutely nothing. If the squad is completely surrounded and overwhelmed, spamming that roll button and moving forward in the level can oftentimes save your life, especially if you get to an elevator or loading area where enemies can't follow and will just despawn. Little bit cheesy, I get it, but even Terminus level mini bosses can sometimes be avoided entirely just by progressing to the next stage of a mission. And sometimes you simply aren't equipped to deal with them, so the only way you can get through and survive is to run. Quick aside here, I know I use some terminology you may not be familiar with. There are 4 distinct enemy classifications. Minoris is for low-level trash, like cultists, gaunts, and Zongors. Majoris is for Tyranid warrior brood and rubric marines. Extremis is for specials, like Scarab occult terminators, raveners, lictors, or lesser sorcerers. And Terminus is for bosses, like the Carnifex, Hive Tyrant, Neurothrope, Hellbrute, and Helldrake. It will tell you the current threat level at the top of your screen and will often update you there before you're even aware that a certain enemy type is on the prowl nearby. So pay attention to it, that can save your life. Now, if you played Vermintide or Darktide, you know how important pace is, which is the speed with which you progress through the level. Always try and keep a good pace in operations mode. You do not have to fight every ambient enemy you come across or every enemy you see, and in fact, it is often a massive detriment to do so. It means you're going to be on the level longer, it means you're going to be pulling more enemies, it means they are more likely to call in reinforcements and begin to overwhelm you. Both for power leveling, which is just getting your XP up quickly and leveling up to get better weapons, better gear, all that, and general completion rate, avoiding certain engagements is key to avoiding frustration that stems from those evil, nasty reinforcement loops that lead to wipes, that usually start because some idiot is trying to kill everything he sees, even when it's way out of the way and ignoring the boys and not any threat to you at all. Do not pull everything you see on the map. Find a route, stick to it, get through quick, especially on higher difficulties. Obviously, when you're starting out, you're going to want to soak in the scenery, you're going to want to try out the animations, totally get that. Talking more about once you've gotten your feet under you and you're into the actual gameplay loop. Now, on the subject of parrying, there are currently 3 separate classifications for weapons when it comes to their defense type, and each has a different way of governing how the parrying system works. Unfortunately, the verbiage used here is rather misleading, but I can illuminate the subject. Balanced, fencing, and block are the 3 choices. When you hover over them, it shows how every single melee weapon in the game falls into one of these 3 categories and explains what each does. Balanced has a standard parry window, one that is fairly small and requires somewhat strict timing to perform, and should you do so, you'll be rewarded with an AoE stagger for trash mobs that are all around you, giving you space and time to do what you need to do, a free counterattack on the enemy you parried, and a follow-up gun strike that will grant you armor. Same goes for fencing, with the major difference being that the parry window is increased substantially, making it much easier to perfect parry. Fencing equals easier perfect parries. So, why would you not always pick fencing weapons then? Well, in reality, I often do. I prioritize the ability to perfect parry because it is so goddamn useful and stylish, but the major trade-off is that some of the master-crafted and artificer tier weapons, green and purple respectively, will have certain stat deficiencies because they are fencing. Not always the case, they're not always worse in every stat, but frequently that is how it shakes out. But I am often willing to trade some cleave and some damage to get a bigger parry window because I think it makes the game easier and more fun. More parries equals more fun. As for the third option, this one is super misleading, and frankly I think it should be renamed, but it is called block. I need to be very clear here. The only traditional block in the game is for the Bulwark's shield. It is the only class and only weapon that can just hold down the block button. For every other class, even if you have a block weapon, be it a thunderhammer, a chainsword, whatever, if you are not a bulwark with a shield, it will still only be a timed parry animation. You cannot sit still and hold block. You still have to time it appropriately. If you successfully time your parry, it will just block the attack and push you backwards without conferring the advantages of a perfect parry where you stagger them and get the gun strike and all that jazz. The benefit then, of course, is that block weapons typically have better stats in other areas that make up for the inability to perfect parry regular attacks. Block weapons can still catch blue aura attacks like Gaunt and Zongor leaps. It doesn't block you out from using those, but they cannot perfect parry regular attack animations from enemies. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Hope that was easy enough to follow. Let's get into the specific details and gameplay maneuvers that will truly keep you alive with each class. Should be fairly obvious by now, but armor is by far your biggest friend in Space Marine 2 because it prevents damage to your real health bar. Any reliable way you can fill that up in the midst of combat will dramatically enhance your survivability because the damage isn't going through to your HP. There are 2 armor classes amongst the Primaris Marines in this game, with Gravis and Bulwark armor giving you 3 armor bars baseline, that's for the Bulwark and for the Heavy, and Phobos armor for Sniper and Vanguard Reavers, only granting 2. Otherwise, there's no real HP difference between the classes outside Bulwark, who has an innate 20% extra HP. Chip damage, once your armor is dropped, is a huge threat and is pretty much always going to be one of the leading causes of wipes. That's where Termagant squads, Deathspitter warriors with their arcing fragmentation shotguns, Rubric Marines with their Inferno bolters, and Cultist snipers, where all those really come into play. Barb Stranglers, for instance, will drop little bulbs that explode into big green vines that cut off egress, and getting caught in them just shreds Primaris armor. Your armor will just completely disintegrate when you move through those. Once that happens, then the Termagant squads will move in. Little shooters will just chunk HP bars once the armor is gone. So, as long as you're keeping armor up, their impact is going to be much less noticeable. How do we do that then? Well, every class and melee weapon archetype in the game, whether they are a dodger or a roller or some combination of both, can do a running attack into a gun strike. If you take nothing else from this video, learn how to running attack into gun strike. It will dramatically increase your survivability in bad situations because it gives you an absurd amount of iframes. And the longer you are virtually untouchable, the more time you have to plan, to think, and to position your character in a way that will maximize your chances of living. All you have to do is dodge or roll towards an enemy, then hit melee attack when coming out of the animation. As long as you hit a trash mob bigger than a cultist, because you can literally run or walk through those guys and they will explode. They are tiny humans. You're a Primaris Marine, a towering creature that's like 9-10 feet tall, completely clad head to toe in armor. Of course, you're going to squash a little dinky human being. Anything bigger than that, but smaller than a Tyranid warrior, as long as you hit them with a running attack, which means Termagant shooter, Hormagant melee boy, or a Zongor, you will automatically get a red crosshair symbol over one of their heads. Then, all you have to do is just press shoot. For me, it's right trigger on pad, then you will gun strike and you will get back 1 bar of armor. This is huge, because it means if you are being overwhelmed, you can basically abuse this move over and over again to keep topping off your armor and prevent permanent damage to your health, all while moving closer to the objective you are trying to complete, or buying time for down allies to respawn on their 60-second or 2-minute timer. Learn how to running attack. It is super good for everybody. You should be using it often. Now, I want to turn your attention to Bulwark for a second, because they are a super entertaining class with some really unique mechanics. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few useful tricks to immediately top off health, most of them related to the banner ult from Bulwark, that have been kinda on and off bugged with perhaps unintended consequences in regards to white health, so it's a little bit hard to know exactly where the balancing will head on that front, but as of the current build, there's some crazy stuff you can do. Number 1, Bulwark is the only class that fully tops off and heals when they go to the drop pod. I believe that is a bug. I do not think that will stay in the game. But, for example, you can drop Banner to fully fill yours and your allies' health bar with contested health, the white health bar. Then, any execution or gun strike after that will fill most or all of your bar back to full, real red health. That means if the entire squad is all at 1 HP and about to die on that last pixel, and a banner gets dropped when enemies are blinking red for execution, the entire squad can immediately execute them and jump back up to full. Or they can melta into a mixed horde to accomplish a very similar thing. There's also some super cool tech the Bulwark can perform when it comes to blocking and parrying. With the Focus Strength perk unlocked at level 22, Shield Bash will outright stagger Zangor and Gaunt, leading to free gun strikes every single time. So you see Tyranid hordes, you Shield Bash them, gun strike. Shield Bash, gun strike. Same thing with Zangor hordes. Those are ubiquitous on higher difficulties. You'll have all kinds of targets you can gun strike for free, essentially. With Invigorating Icon at level 23, no matter where you are on the map, dropping Banner will fill all teammates' bars with contested health all the way, so you don't even need to drop it on them to get the benefit. Before that point, normally you'd have to be right next to your teammates to drop the banner on them. But anywhere they are on the map with this ability, execute while health is full white, and it will suddenly go full red. Incredibly strong, best ult in the game, easiest way to keep your teammates topped off and alive, especially when stacked with Vanguard's Inner Fire for 15% cooldown reduction on ult with every single performed finisher. This means anytime you execute anyone, gunstrike or melee execute, you will get a 15% cooldown reduction towards your next ult. So what that means is you can just spam banners all throughout the map. It is really gross. And then there's the Perfect Parry Shock, which is a full damage shock grenade for 5 seconds. It can be buffed with 25% extra damage a little bit later in the tree every time you perfect parry. Parry and attack, electric field forms on the ground, take 1 or 2 steps backward, then just hold block as the entire horde kills itself under the wrathful gaze of Pikachu. Just make sure all the Gaunts or Zongor are walking into that electrical field, and they will die very quickly. Turns Bulwark into a brick wall with insane DPS, can clutch just about any nasty situation you could possibly think of with that tech. But you 100% need to be aware of this because it's something that really impacted my gameplay in the first couple of days. When playing Bulwark, he is the only class in the game that can just hold block, as we said, which can and will screw up your parries a lot, because if you hold down parry even a fraction of a second too long, you will block instead and no longer be able to parry, because you're blocking. This doesn't impact any other class, where you can just hold down the parry button a bit too long every time, and it will still just play the parry animation because you can't block with those characters. Remember, no other class can truly block besides Bulwark. So what happens here is that the muscle memory can easily get screwed up, especially if you're on gamepad, Xbox controller, PlayStation controller, especially if you are not running a fencing weapon, and there's a good chance you'll spend entire runs completely unable to parry anything. You're like, what the hell is going on? I can't do it. Why am I so bad? Why do I suck? That is why. You are holding parry a fraction too long, and it's blocking instead, and that can and will get you killed. It can feel super bad. Be cognizant of that. I pretty much always play fencing weapons with Bulwark because perfect parry is such a gigantic part of his game. And final tip, cancel calls for reinforcements anytime it's possible. There will be this weird echoing pulsating sound that goes throughout the map. Careful.
That's all you got for suckling at a demon's teeth.
I think there's a sorcerer.
Oh, god damn it. Oh.
The enemy that is calling in reinforcements will be highlighted, and after a 5 or 6 second period, they will finish the call and a wave will spawn in. One of the easiest ways to lose is to allow a single enemy to call in a wave, then you get caught in a death loop spiral where you start becoming overwhelmed, and then another enemy calls in reinforcements because you're busy fighting trash and can't shoot him and stop him, and then 2 or 3 waves stack up, particularly during an event, and especially with an extremist or terminus enemy present, there's a really good chance your squad is just going to be sent back to the menu. A simple charged headshot from a plasma pistol or running melee attack on a summoning enemy could have prevented that loop from ever starting in the first place, so keep your eyes peeled. When you hear that sound and you see that highlight, go after them. They are top priority almost always. Unfortunately, sometimes there's some weirdo lone straggler that will call in from behind 2 walls and from like 200 yards away, and in that case, it is what it is, nothing you can do about it. But when you can stop them, do it. That is your top priority. In my opinion, I think that should never happen. They should have to have direct line of sight and be within a certain distance of your team to call in reinforcements. That's not really how it works in practice right now. But yeah, running dodge attacks, perfect parrying, and abusing contested health will keep you and your team alive when Space Marine 2 makes landfall. They are the core mechanics that even make survival possible, especially on Substantial and Ruthless, and they aren't all explained super well in game. Makes for a super enjoyable and high skill ceiling combat loop though, that is very rewarding to learn and master, and I think it's going to be what gives this game legs for the months and years to come. I hope this guide was helpful. I have been your host, Any Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War, and I'll be bringing you a ton of Space Marine 2 content in the immediate future, from multiplayer to operations, lore, and everything in between. This game is awesome. Seriously. See you guys in the next one.